80 miles in a 30-mile-per-hour speed zone. If that is true, and investigators are hinting in the case of that Washington State train derailment, that might have been exactly what was going on, something that seems eerily similar to what happened in Philadelphia with a similar Amtrak disaster back in 2015. Dan Springer in DuPont, Washington, with the latest. Dan, what are you hearing?
Yeah, and Neil, National Transportation Safety Board members arrived here on scene in Washington State late yesterday, and the very first thing they did is they took the event data recorder out of that rear engine, which is the only part of that train left on the tracks, and stunningly it confirmed reports that the train was in fact going 80 miles per hour on that sharp curve where the speed drops down to 30 miles per hour. Now, just looking at the track and the angle of the curve as they cross over Interstate 5, it's obvious that speed was the major factor. The question seems to be, was it the only factor, and why had the train not slowed down? We got a much closer look at the mangled train cars as crews worked through the night to remove them. The NTSB expects to be on scene at least a week.
We don't know at this point. I think it's too early to tell, and that's why we want to carefully look at the track and the signals and the human performance. And so we'll be, we hope, interviewing the crew and to find out if they have more information that can help us figure this out.
Officials did not say whether a positive train control system could have prevented this tragedy. That's a system by which you can actually slow down a train that's going too fast. Meantime, we're hearing more and more stories of heroism and unbelievable stories of survival. The stories keep coming. First responders used whatever they could to get inside those train parts as they were hanging over the trestle behind me. 3 people were killed and 70 were sent to local hospitals. We don't know all the conditions and how many are still critical, but everyone who survived is grateful to be alive.
After getting myself upright and my legs unfolded, I saw her legs, and I reached down and I shook one, and she shook it back. I said, "Oh, boy." I said, "You all right?" She says, "I think so."
There was this body lying there. I mean, he had hardly had any clothes on. The clothes had just been ripped off him, and he was obviously dead.
Just terrible stories coming out of this, and also, like I said, stories of heroism from people who responded and arrived and helped the people who were in that train. Interstate 5, by the way, Neil, continues to be closed southbound here. 60,000 cars pass through here a day, so it's a major inconvenience for folks, but we're being told by transportation officials that they should be able to reopen this perhaps by Friday. Neil?
Dan Springer, thank you, my friend, very, very much. So again, to Dan's report here, why was the conductor, the engineer, going in excess of 80 miles an hour on a bend in the tracks? Oliver McGee is a former Deputy Assistant Secretary of Transportation for President Bill Clinton. Very good to have you, Secretary. What do you make of that?
Well, I think this is an issue about speed. Positive train control was not necessarily in place in other protection technologies that were necessary to control the speed as this train approached this 30-mile-per-hour curve, but at 50 miles per hour over speed. And positive train control, which is a control engineering mechanism, is designed to communicate with the rail, with the control cockpit or the engineer himself or herself, and to be able to essentially stop the train or to significantly slow it down. It's also designed to look for any types of obstructions that may be on the tracks or any type of dense traffic that may take place, which this is not the place here. But most importantly, the NTSB is being very careful because they need to look at what was happening when the train was approaching the curve. And if it was leaning over too much, Neil, you could have possibly had some torsion twisting with the connections, and then simulations that are online are showing that the cars twisted relative to each other and then rolled down the embankment. And without crash containment along the approach to the bridge, then that's why you had all the tumbling of the cars going down the embankment, but more importantly, in the worst condition, tumbling the car onto another mode of transportation, which happens to be Interstate 5.
Secretary, do we know whether the conductor and or engineer or anyone involved have been tested for drugs or anything like that? I would imagine that's a routine follow-up to something like this.
That is what the NTSB is being very careful about, because that human factor is a very critical thing for the FRA, and it's the second most factor of crashes in derailments.
Because why would someone be going that fast? Let's say it was something mechanical, or that they couldn't control it. I mean, the other obvious issue is that he or she wanted to move very, very quickly, and was either trying to make or get ahead of schedule. This was an inaugural run on this particular train. A lot more trains were planned that day as part of this new, busier run. What do you make of that?
Well said, Neil, because some of the speculation out there has been that this was sort of like a Titanic run. Remember the Titanic movie, and you're trying to do the inaugural path or the inaugural travel, and you need to get there early to show that this train is going to be fast and efficient and get there very, very fast. Like I said in the beginning of our segment, this is all about speed, and this is all about communicating that speed as well. But sometimes when you get a little overzealous and try to get there get to home base pretty fast, you sometimes miss the target, and that's probably what happened here. But this is all speculation until the NTSB gets deeply into their investigation. They're already past flight data recorder, but they need to do all their work, and we need to wait for that, just like what we have to do with NTSB with airplane crashes. And it usually takes a little bit of time for them to do that investigation, but they're very, very good at doing that. But they're going to look at every aspect associated with this event, and they're going to get us a pretty good solution of what's going on here within a few days.
All right, we hope so. Secretary, thank you for taking the time very, very much.
Thank you for having me, Neil.
Oliver McGee, the former Deputy Assistant Secretary of Transportation during the Bill Clinton years.